But even after his hip is wrenched out of its socket, that sounds really painful. God tells him, let me go, for the dawn is breaking. And Jacob said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Jacob at some point realizes, I think something's going on here with who this man is, and he won't let go. Why? Because Jacob has run out of options. And if God does not bless him, if God doesn't enter into his story, Jacob is going to be left alone with no plan to face his brother Esau, and he could lose everything. And unless God blesses him, this is the end of the road for Jacob. He got that blessing, he tricked it from Esau, and he tricked his dad. But it needs to be real at some point here. Excuse me. So he says, I will not let you go until you bless me. Verse 27, this man says the strangest thing. What is your name? They've been wrestling all night. And they're just now getting to the introductions? What does that have to do with the blessing? He says, I'm not going to let go unless you bless me. And this man looks at him and he says, what's your name? What in the world is going on here? You know what? In Genesis chapter 27, we read this. Do you remember? Let's let that go by. That's a little distracting. Do you remember when Jacob stood before his father, what Isaac asked him? He said, who are you? And Jacob replied, it's Esau. And again later in the story, his dad asked him, what is your name? And he said, Esau. And he gave Jacob the blessing, but Jacob was pretending to be Esau. So now when Jacob is clinging to God and he says, I will not let you go until you bless me, God looks at him and he says, tell me your name. And you better not say Esau. And he replied, Jacob, deceiver, heel grabber. That's my name. Jacob admits now to who he is. He's being real now. He is guilty of trying to obtain a blessing outside of the power of God. He's been trying to get a hold of his blessing all on his own. So he says he won't let him go until he blesses him. And God says, I won't bless you until you're going to be honest with me and tell me your name. Jacob is holding on for dear life. You know, this is an important issue. I wonder what you are holding on to in your life to obtain the blessing. Because I have found that we hold on to things that are not capable of giving us a blessing. Just like Jacob has been holding on to the ankle of Esau his whole life, that's not going to get him his blessing. He needed to let go of that and embrace who God created him to be and actually cling on to the Lord. I wonder what you're hanging on to, because when we cling on to anything outside of God, you know what's happening is we are the ones who are controlling our life, or so we think, and we hang on to that control and we make a mess of things, and we will never get the blessing of God that way. And yet so many of us try to do this. It makes us angry, bitter, frustrated people because we're trying to attain the promises of God without depending on God for the fruition of those promises. That's exactly where Jacob was, and God broke him of it because God wanted to bless Jacob, but he would not bless Jacob while Jacob was pretending to be Esau. So he says, my name is Jacob. He stops pretending. We're being all honest now. In verse 28, God says, your name will no longer be Jacob, which means deceiver. From now on, you will be called Israel, because you have fought with God and with men and have won. Israel, which means triumphant with God. God changes Jacob's name, and it changes Jacob to the core. He blesses him. It's so interesting in verse 29 that after this takes place, it says, the man replied, then he blessed Jacob there. When Jacob came to the end of himself and he quit pretending to be someone that he wasn't, and he let go of all control, and he was no longer trying to manipulate the situation, he was no longer lying, he was no longer deceiving. When he let all that go and was just honest with God, with who he was, it says that God blessed Jacob there. And friends, that's where God will bless you too. But as long as you are clinging on to something in your own control, as long as you are holding on to something, trying to attain God's blessing through any other way, which so many of us are guilty of, we are not going to find the blessing of God. We're going to strive, we're going to struggle, and we're going to make messes of things just like Jacob did. It is our human nature. And God is calling us to lay that down, to stop pretending, and to become the person that God is calling us to be. You know, I love the prayer of David Livingstone. He was a missionary to Africa. And he said in this prayer, where he recognized he wanted to depend on God only, so he said, God, sever every tie in my heart except the tie that binds my heart to yours. What a prayer. Could you pray that tonight? God, if you see my heart hanging on to anything but you, I give you permission. I ask you to sever that tie of my heart so that there's only one tie that exists, and that's the tie that binds my heart to yours. What a prayer. God took Jacob through a journey that led him there. And he wants you to be there. But you've got to let go of those things in this life that are keeping you from depending on God, that you believe as long as you are in control of this, things are going to turn out okay. You'll be safe as long as you can control this. You'll be okay. God says, let go of it. Let go of this.